And in the night, in my sleep, I came into contact with these unseen powers. They gave predictions concerning Jimi Hendrix, what he was going to be doing, and even his very death. When I kind of woke up from this, I knew that I'd had a real experience. It was quite unnerving, especially when those things happened to Jimi Hendrix. So that...
But what, cards, automatic writing, tell us a little bit about that.
Well, yes, I mean, the whole point is, what you must understand about the occult is you can use absolutely anything to access the spiritual realm. It's, some have tarot cards. You can use anything from chicken entrails to tarot cards, and Titania has her own modern version of this. At the end of the day, these are stage props with which you access the unseen occultic realm of spirits. And so, well, of course, Africa, I have an African background, South America, I've seen it all over the world. So
and is that what you were involved in?
There was some of those aspects, yes. I mean, I could tell about people from cards. I didn't need tarot cards. You could use any cards whatsoever.
Okay.
And tea leaves, everything. All of it was against believing in Jesus Christ as your personal Savior.
Colin, forgive me just jumping in, but isn't this something that you're discussing which actually has an application across all ritual and religious belief? You
no,
can
not at all.
No, please, let me finish. You could go and speak to somebody who's involved in the church, and they can have a very clear vision of their own sense of Christ, which you've been talking about. But you will find that there are many people who will be quite genuine in their own sense, who are actually quite controlling in their own right. But what I'm saying here is, I think it's a misnomer to say that it's cast between occult and religion. It's part and parcel of the same thing.
Well, I didn't make that distinction, you made that distinction. I'm not drawing a distinction between occult and religion. Occult is a deeply religious practice, and there are occult practices throughout many different religions, but with the coming of Judaism, in the Hebrew prophets, they warned that this was not of God, and also in the New
But
Testament
forgive my saying,
Christianity.
I'm sorry, Anne, can I just, I've got to answer that. Just because you're wanting to throw baby and bathwater out together, you wouldn't have anything to build your foundation
No,
on
Titania, not at all.
without those prophets
Can
who
I
spoke
answer
to
that
something or
for you?
someone. They're
Can I-
just men,
we're
Colin.
going to have to just move on. Kieran, I want to bring you in at this stage in the game. You've been sitting very patiently listening.
Yes. Well, first of all, let me say that I come from a very different perspective, I feel, from everybody sitting here, in that I am a scientist. I'm also skeptical in the true sense of the word, which means that I'm constantly questioning. So I'm even questioning my colleagues, questioning psychic ability, questioning witches, questioning religion. But that's where I come from, constantly questioning. Now, we've gone off on a little bit of a tangent because we're talking about religion, but to take it back a bit in terms of prophesizing, which you did mention, in terms of parapsychology, there are some experiments that were done with the Rhines, for example, in the Institute of Parapsychology in the 50s, some later research that was done in the 70s by a guy called Schmidt, also in America. But there's very little looking at precognition, and even those particular experiments do not show conclusively that there is this ability that exists that means you can predict the future. And that's where I'm coming from. The most convincing evidence for prophesizing, for predicting the future, for precognition, which we call it in parapsychology, the most convincing evidence comes from anecdotal accounts. It doesn't come from laboratory work. And that's where I get up on my high horse and say, if it's anecdotal, there's a real problem for it in terms of a scientist, because there's lots of alternative explanations for what might be going on. And that's just where I come from. My experience with clients visiting psychics and trying to get an idea of what's going to happen in the future, it's love, relationships, family, money.
Yes.
It's those basic
Essentially,
things that
yes.
people want to know about.
I think that he's absolutely right. People are wanting answers. They are questioning. And I think that's why a lot of people are searching. And as Colin was saying, they are searching to fill this vacuum. And I think that that's why people are searching absolutely anywhere.
Don't you think it's a bit deeper, and it's also largely about the fact that people are searching when they're in trouble? People do want to come and talk to someone who, and a lot of people who read, as I do, are psychologists, so they're using a kind of particular method of counselling to go through it. But I think the answer, Anne, is that you go when you have lost your way, when you can't actually see objectively in your own life. And it may be emotional traumas, it could be problems with dealing with something to do with business, or it could be just even a sort of a sense of not quite knowing what step you want to take next. And I think in those situations, it's all very well to say all the answers are in the Bible or in God. I think a lot of people, when I speak to them, will say they don't feel that there's a particularly proactive relationship happening, that God's not very interested in their suffering.
There's a degree to which I agree with that, because, you see, the church has been hopelessly affected by the Enlightenment. To find supernatural in the church is quite rare in many cases, but there is a revival and a renewal of the supernatural amongst churches. I mean, in our church, people are prayed for, they meet with Christ, they see physical healings, they have clear words of direction for their life within the framework of the Bible. And my point is, would appeal to Titania and all those who are interested in the supernatural, go back to the Bible, go back to what the Bible says, and you'll find the answer to all that you need. All the wisdom is found there in the scriptures. So what you need is to have a heart for God, and you will find the answers to the deepest issues of your life.
We're going to have to take a short break just now, and in part two, what we're going to be doing is asking, what is the source of the knowledge that fortune tellers claim to have, and is psychic ability a gift, or is it something that can be learned? Join us in a minute. Well, welcome back to Live Talk. We're asking who can tell the future. Is it the psychics with their tarot cards and crystal balls, or is it only God who can make accurate predictions? Or are neither true, and the future is a mystery that nobody can reveal? Titania, what methods do you use currently, and what methods have you used in the past to predict the future?
And when I was at university many years ago, a bit like Collins, many years ago, I used to read tarot cards, and I became very excited by them because I think they are a beautiful symbolic language, and I found that they became a sort of second nature to me. So I used a thing called the Brotherhood of Light Tarot, the astrological tarot, and found them very good for isolating particular events and very sort of interesting sort of conscious states within people, subconscious states within people, and loved those. Many years later I became familiar with the cards which I use, these ones which I've produced myself, which are Titania's fortune cards, really a modern version of Madame Lenormand's cards, for which she read for Napoleon, and took them through very difficult times, right through the Reign of Terror and into Napoleon's sort of emperorship. She was a very extraordinary woman, consulted by everybody in Europe.
That's what you use currently?
These are the ones I use now, and only for friends, I must say. I've written about this subject for a long time, but for the last 10-12 years I've only been able to do it as a gift, so not as something which is a business transaction. But I still believe greatly in their power to explain through symbolism very subtle states in people's minds.
Okay. Dawn, what methods did you use, and also did you actually use them for example, for friends, or were you predicting just for yourself?
I actually came to it in a very sort of gentle, not a gentle way, I sort of fell into it. You know, it was a sort of a gradual process, and I ended up using dowsing crystals to determine the future with simple yes or no answers, and also the tarot and various other things.
Those methods, were they just for your own benefit?
They were really for my own benefit. I wasn't that concerned in telling the future for other people. It was for my own benefit for a time to answer questions that I needed answering.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And what, Titania, what do you believe is the source of the power or the accuracy, if you like, behind the cards?
I think they can be astonishingly accurate. I don't have a wonderful theory about how it works. Quite differently from Colin, I don't actually think it does come from a great source. I have to say, I think it comes from within. I think inside of us all, we are all radio transmitters and radio receivers. And I think the problem for reading for yourself is that you're often too close to the problem and can't be objective in knowing your own way forward. So that's where someone doing it for you is incredibly, objectifying and helpful. I think it comes from within.
Okay.
And I think that knowledge is to access it, and this is what Colin did say, you can use many different methods to do it. That I agree. I think as long as you invest a sort of meditational process with it, you can use lots of different ways to do this.
Your source, Dawn, what do you believe was the source of your power?
I actually believed at the time that my power was from me. It was something that I didn't think had a spiritual implication whatsoever.
Okay.
And I felt, I felt it was definitely from me. I didn't actually just read the tarot cards for myself. I did actually go and visit people who read them for me as well, who were, recommended or whatever.
So presumably the people that were doing the readings for you, you believed that the source of that power that they had was within them.
Absolutely.
That's not what you believe now, though.
Absolutely not.
Okay, Kieran? Comments?
Yeah, it's very difficult for me because I'm looking at all of this, trying to take a step back, and certainly with my research and speaking to mediums, psychics, fortune tellers, you name it. The source is everywhere. It can be, people have claimed it's from God, they claim it, within, almost like a Wiccan natural perspective. Other people claim that they're getting it from some sort of other dimension. You hear people talking about something called the Akashic Records, which is almost like a spiritual library that exists on another dimension, and people can tap into that, and then they can get information about the future or information about a departed relative, that sort of thing.